Alright guys, so our journey begins with project settings, a crucial foundation for your entire editing process. These settings include resolution, frame rate, and other essential details. So how to navigate to the project settings, you can find them down here in the right corner. Project settings, you're going to click on it, and there you see project settings, DaVinci Resolve. You want to click on master settings, and then the first thing that you see is timeline resolution. I filmed this video in 1920 by 1080, so it's already a good resolution. But let's say you shot a video on 4K, you can choose to watch it on the timeline in a 4K resolution. Right here is 4K. For now, this is good. Leave the rest to the default standards, and then we get the timeline frame rate. You have two timeline frame rates that are very important. You have 24 frames per second or 25. So when you live in the US, most of the time you want to use 23 or 24. And for me, I live in Europe, I want to use 25 frames per second. Then you see the playback frame rate also is 25 frames per second. Then we go to video monitoring, and you want to have your video format the same as your timeline resolution and time frame rates. So 1080p, 1080p, and timeline frame rates 25. And right here is 25 frames per second. Then leave this to your default settings. Then we see video bit depth. And this is an important part because I don't want to get too technical, but let's say you own a Sony a7 III and you shot your footage in S-Log2 8-bit. Okay, that means 8-bit color. That's just the setting of your camera. Then you also want to set this to 8-bit. So I have a Sony a7 IV that shoots S-Log3 in 10-bit color. So I want to set this to 10-bit. Then we leave this as it is, default settings. We're not gonna do too many things right here. And then you see working folders. And the thing that I want to explain are the cache files, because every time you're gonna save a project, he's gonna save a little bit of cache of your project. So if you never delete the cache, it can happen that DaVinci runs a bit slow. You want to set the cache to a file location. Most of the time, people save it on an external SSD or just on a drive, especially used for editing. So I have it set to my local disk C cache clips, and right here you see all the cache files. So when you're done with a project and you deliver it to a client and you're 100% sure you're not going to use that project again, I would recommend to once in a month delete your cache. Now, a few more important things in your project settings. If you are a Mac user, this is very important for you because it can happen that you color grade your footage in DaVinci Resolve, and when you export it, the colors look really washed out. Alright, so if you are a Mac user, you probably need to change your timeline color space to SDR Rec 709. And if you're a Mac user and you don't see it, use Rec 709 Scene. Okay, and the output color also should be different for Mac users. Instead of Rec 709 Scene, you would set it to Rec 709A, right up here. If you're a Windows user, you can set this to Rec 709 Gamma 2.4. And then we go to General Options. We leave it as it is. Camera Raw, also leave it as it is. And then Capture and Playback. And right here you see Video Capture and Playback. We also want to change this one to 1080p 25 frames per second because we work on a timeline that is 25 frames per second. Just a little bit more information about this timeline. Why do I work on a timeline that is 25 frames per second? Because that is just the film standard in Europe. And 25 frames per second, it looks the most cinematic to me, but that's a whole different section. Okay, so video depth, it's 10-bit. If you don't see this, use 8-bit. Then this I always leave to the default settings. I leave this also to the default settings. This one as well, and this one as well. All right, so that is everything that you need to know for the project settings. Then I'm gonna solve a problem right now for you guys, because we set all the right settings, and then we can say hit save, and then we can start to work in our project. So every time we're gonna open up a new project, we need to go back to our project settings and by hand change the resolution, change the timeline frame rate, change the video format, and that's something that will cost a lot of time. So I'm now gonna show you a trick that will solve this problem and will save a lot of time. So right here you see these three dots, you click on it, and you want to set your current setting as a default preset. Yes, update it. And now every time you're gonna start up a new project, DaVinci Resolve already set your right project settings in here. You can also decide to save this as a preset and then import the preset, but that's only necessary when you work with a different timeline frame rate. For now, this is the right setting for me. Just check your files, how you filmed your files, and in which frame rate you want to edit your footage.